Hey everyone, this is Russ from RetroGameCore. So I love my PS Vita. I've had it for about 6 months now, and it's just a great little device. I love that I can play a ton of different PS Vita games, PS2 remakes, PS1 games, as well as PSP games. And admittedly, it is not the best emulation device in the world, but I still think it's a worthwhile investment, even after all these years. Now, you know what else I also love? Is my other PS Vita. Now, this is a PS Vita 2000, the second model that came out. And this one can play all the same games as the PS Vita 1000, but it also has a couple other upgrades and one serious downgrade. And so there's always this big debate about which one is the best one to buy. And so in today's video, we're going to do a deep dive and try to help you make that decision. Because when it comes down to it, these devices aren't cheap, and I want to make sure you buy the right one for you the first time around. So without any further delay, let's jump into this. So let's start with the PS Vita 1000. Now this came out in 2012, and one of the major distinctions about this is that it has an OLED display. And as I'll show you later, it's just beautiful. In terms of controls, you have a D-pad and face buttons. You have 2 analog sticks that are not clickable, and then single L and R buttons. On the sides, you can see it has a metal enclosure. And same thing up top here, it has this chrome kind of feel to it. It has a couple different ports. This is an accessory port that no one ever uses. And your power button on the far left and your volume buttons on the right. And finally, the other port on the left is your game card port. This is also where you're going to put your SD card if you have an adapter. On the bottom here, you can see there's a headphone jack as well as a proprietary plug. And a lot of people complain about this, that you have to use one specific plug for one specific device. I kind of don't mind it. But if that's something that bothers you, you don't want to have a bunch of cables laying around, you might be interested in what's available with the PS Vita 2000. On the back, you have this beautiful fingerprint collector that also works as a rear touchpad, but not many games actually use it. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And finally, on the bottom right, you also have a little memory card slot. You're going to need this with the PS Vita 1000 because it doesn't have any internal memory. And that's an essential component of jailbreaking this device. Let's talk a little bit about the D-pad here. So both PS Vita D-pads have this kind of clicky feel to them. And when you hear the words clicky, you might think, well, that's not very good, but it's actually pretty nice. This is probably one of the best clicky D-pads I've ever used. I'm also a fan of these very small analog sticks. They're exactly responsive for what I need, and I like that the top of them have this nice grippiness to them that makes your fingers stay in place. Now the PS Vita home button is kind of flush with the device, and it's a bit of a pain to actually press. Same thing with the start and select buttons, which I'll show you here in a minute. First, let's do the face buttons. These face buttons are also very small, and they also have a clicky feel to them. That being said, they're nice and bouncy and very responsive. They have a very premium feel to them. The right analog stick's just like the left one. Now here are those start and select buttons. You can see here they're very flush with the device. And I'll tell you, often when I try to press the start or the select button, I have to press it twice because I miss it the first time around. I don't think it's a huge deal because you're not going to use these buttons during actual gameplay for the most part. But it is a minor annoyance to me. Okay, moving over to the PS Vita 2000. There were some minor changes to the D-pad. Some people prefer the older one. I like this newer one. It seems a little bit springier to me. Analog sticks are the same, but you can see that the home button sticks out just a tiny bit. It's much easier to press down on now. Same thing with the start and select buttons. Really, in terms of buttons, these are the two major changes, the home button and the start and select buttons. They're just much easier to press down on now. Now I can't really tell a difference between these face buttons either, but some people have said that these are a little bit springier this way. Now you can see the case on the device doesn't have any of that metal anymore, it's just a smooth plastic at this point, and it's a much thinner device as well. They got rid of that peripheral port on the top, and I think it's a good thing because no one was using it, and you can see the game card slot is still there. On the bottom, in addition to the regular headphone jack, you now have a micro USB charger. That makes things a lot easier. And it also has a memory card slot, but you don't actually need it for jailbreaking because this device has a 1GB internal storage. This also has that touchpad on the back, but it's much smaller than it was on the PS Vita 1000. Some of the later PS Vita 2000 models have this matte look to them, and I really like that. So if you don't like that glossy piano black look on the PS Vita 1000, make sure you look for the matte version of the PS Vita 2000 when you're doing your shopping. Okay, let's compare the weights of these devices. The PS Vita 1000 is 285 grams altogether, and the PS Vita 2000 is 222 grams. So that makes the PS Vita 2000 about 20% lighter than the original. Now let's compare some components themselves. Let's start with the face buttons. You can see on the 1000 it's 6.76 millimeters, the 2000 is 6.82, so just about the same. And the D-pad on the PS Vita 2000 is 6.91, and the D-pad on 1000 is 6.93, so basically the same. Now even though the Vita 2000 is thinner, it's actually taller, 83.89 versus 85.55. When it comes to width, you can see that the PS Vita 1000 is 18.95 millimeters, whereas the PS Vita 1000 is 15.22. Again, that's about 20% thinner. Now holding each device is a bit of a different experience. On the PS Vita 1000, it has a much heftier feel to it, and they both kind of fit in your hands in a comfortable way. It's easy to kind of lay your index finger across the roundness of the device itself. It's a very comfortable place to hold it, and then you can just move your index finger up until the L1 and R1 buttons. It's not a bad experience at all. And it's the same kind of experience with the PS Vita 2000. Definitely a lighter experience in the hands. Say if you were going to lay on your back and then play this, it's a much easier experience. And the PS Vita 2000 just feels like a more portable device. You feel like you can just kind of grab it and take it around with you, no problem at all. Now the PS Vita 1000 doesn't have that same feel. To me, I feel like I need to baby this thing all the time. I'm just so worried about dropping it or something else like that. I feel like the PS Vita 1000 is never going to leave the house, whereas the PS Vita 2000, I take it outside all the time. So let's compare the two screens here. The PS Vita 1000 has an OLED display, whereas the PS Vita 2000 has an LCD display. And you can see the colors just don't compare here. There's just deeper blacks and deeper coloring with the OLED display. Even when you go into something like the settings, the green on the PS Vita 1000 is just more green. It's hard to explain, but it does look better. Let's try a couple different themes and see if that actually changes the feel of the device itself. Let's try this one here, this Starry Night. I want to see what it looks like with a darker theme. And you can see the difference is not as pronounced when you're using darker colors. So that might be a good thing. If you use a darker theme, you're maybe not going to miss kind of the color saturation and the deep blacks like you do when you're looking at something that's a little bit brighter. Now if I move over to a different theme, like the crystal theme, you can see the coloring is just changed again. In general, the colors don't seem as true with the PS Vita 2000, and everything looks just a little bit washed out by comparison. Now both of these screens are beautiful regardless. It's just that the PS Vita 1000 is a little bit more beautiful. Let's do a comparison with my macro lens. Here's the PS Vita 2000. You can see the coloring is not bad. You can actually see a good distinction and read the text pretty clearly. And yeah, when you look at the OLED display, the colors are much richer and more saturated. And the text is just a tiny bit easier to read. In general, you just get that very stark contrast between the lights and the darks in the PS Vita 1000. And unfortunately, you don't have that same experience with the PS Vita 2000. Now we're getting way into the weeds here. I don't expect you to have a macro lens every time you're playing your games, but I really want to highlight the differences here. Here's actual in-game footage with the PS Vita 2000. It actually looks pretty good. PS Vita 1000, you don't really see that much of a difference between the two. When it comes to textures and sharpness, they're both the same. It's really about the colors. And here's a good example here with both devices actually running a game. You can see that the browns are browner in the PS Vita 1000 and the greens aren't quite as overwhelming. In the PS Vita 2000, everything just looks a little bit more green, like the hue is off a little bit. And again, I think you're only going to notice this difference if you have them side by side. When I'm just playing the PS Vita 2000, I never have any complaints about the colorization. Moving over to the retro side of things, here's RetroArch running Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo. You can see that Mega Man on the screen here just stands out much more when it comes to the colors. He really pops. And he doesn't quite pop as much on the PS Vita 2000, but again, he still looks really good. Now getting away from the screen for a second here, look at the sides of the PS Vita 2000 here. Because of that matte case, you don't see any fingerprints or anything else like that. It just looks nice. I really like this matte kind of look. Now compare that to the PS Vita 1000 and look at all those fingerprints already from just a few seconds of gameplay. And this may not bother you, but for me, I actually feel like I always need to have a microfiber cloth around so that I can wipe it clean after every few minutes of playing it. And that's kind of annoying. Now there's actually an app you can use to increase the color saturation and contrast in the PS Vita 2 display. And I'll leave the instructions in my written guide, which I'll have linked in the video description below. But I'm just going to install this VPK right here. It's called Registry Editor. And you need to have a jailbroken device in order to do this. So I'm just going to install this registry editor here. It's going to ask me, do you really want to do this? And you say, yeah, man, I want to do it. You let the installation process run through, and then when you go back to your home screen on your device, you're going to have a new entry there, and it's going to be called the registry editor. And inside here, you want to go to the configuration section and then go to display. And all you want to do is take these two bottom values and change them from 0 to 1. It's as simple as just clicking on it, switching over to numbers, selecting 1, and then doing the same for the other. And that's it. Go ahead and hit start to make those changes. You can exit out of the app and then just power cycle your device. Turn it off and then turn it back on again. Okay, so here we are with the new PS Vita with the more saturated colors. And the difference is subtle, but I do think it is much better. I don't think it compares to the PS Vita 1000. You'll see people out there promising, oh, make your 2000 look like a 1000. This is not going to do the trick, but it is going to make it better if you really like that saturated feel to things. Again, for reference, here's the PS Vita 1000, and here's the PS Vita 2000. And sure enough, Mega Man does have a little bit more pop to him. So I do think this is a worthwhile upgrade. It doesn't compare to the PS Vita 1000, but man, it gets a little bit closer, and that's pretty cool. Personally, once I found out this trick, I changed it permanently on my device. I decided, you know what, this is good enough. I love it. Now, both of these devices are jailbroken and they have an SD card inside, same 256 gigabyte size. And they're using the YAMT method that I showed off in an earlier video to run everything off of the SD card. So for all intents and purposes, the boot time on both of these devices should be exactly the same. Now, for my device in particular, it is not the same. There's about a 5-second delay between the PS Vita 1000 and 2000. You can see it takes about 15 seconds from start to home screen on the PS Vita 2000, whereas it takes about 20 seconds on the PS Vita 1000. This may be unique to my devices, but I do see that there's a 5-second faster boot time on the PS Vita 2000. Okay, wrapping things up here, I've kind of gone over everything that I find important in these two devices in particular. And that's mostly going to be the feel of the buttons, the size of the device, and then the quality of the display. So let's kind of go over some of the comparison here. When it comes to performance, I think they're equal. We did see that there's a boot time difference between the 2000 and 1000, but I think that's a really negligible difference. When it comes to the screen, no question the PS Vita 1000 is better. Now when it comes to size and weight, I prefer to have a lighter device, and because of that, I like the PS Vita 2000. It feels more like a legitimate gaming device than, say, for example, like a premium phone or something, which is what the PS Vita 1000 sometimes feels like. I think when it comes to convenience, I think the PS Vita 2000 also wins. A lot of people appreciate that micro USB port, and it just feels like a more pocketable device because it's mostly made out of plastic, it's thinner so it fits in your pocket, and it's just something that you feel like you can take around with you out in town. The PS Vita 1000 feels like it needs to go in a glass case or something. Now, I didn't mention it earlier, but the PS Vita 2000 has about an hour longer battery life. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it's not powering an OLED display. So if battery life's important to you, the PS Vita 2000 is a much better deal. Now, if having a premium feel is something that's important to you, then the PS Vita 1000 wins hands down. It definitely feels like a more expensive product when you're holding it. And that OLED display definitely lends to that as well. So between these two devices, which one do I prefer the most? And you might think it's the PS Vita 1000 because I love having a nice display. But to be honest, it's actually the PS Vita 2000. I think the portability of this device and some of the convenient features outweigh the screen itself. This is a device I prefer to play like when I'm laying in bed, or if I'm on a car ride, things like that. It's always going to be the 2000 I reach for. And I gotta admit, I love this PS Vita 2000 that the other day I actually bought a second one. I bought a white version. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hack this one as well, and then I'm going to put one of these away for storage, so that way 20 years from now, if I want to play the PS Vita again, I have one in storage that I can just bust out and start playing all over again. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions below, and let me know in the comments which one you like the best. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming!